let me know.
All right.
So Buster, I'm going to cue this up to play Over the Rainbow. So all you're going to have to do is hit the play button. Okay? So all you got to do is just hit that triangle when you're ready.
Set the forward. Okay. Cool. Time. Welcome to Reflections for the month. I think it's going to be a fun program, a little bit different format than you're used to, in that we've got 7 or 8 folks who have volunteered to share their stories. You may or may not have noticed, but thank Teresa, as you came in, we did have prelude music, and it was all travel songs. I want particularly to thank Teresa and Doug Geyer for their help in this program. Teresa developed the survey that gave us the information to build the program. Doug put it together on a Excel spreadsheet where we could read it all at one time. It's been very, very helpful, and thank you guys for that. Now, I know it works. We tried it earlier. Move forward. Wait a minute. There we go. Okay. I wanted to kind of set the stage for Brandon Oaks today. And to set the stage, a reminder as we look at the big blue globe that our universe is how many years old? I know one person knows the answer. How many? 13 billion. 13.7 billion years. Wow. All right. How old is the Earth? 5. 4.5 to be correct. You've been reading, Fred. Excellent. 4.5 billion years that blue globe has been out there in various forms, may not always have been blue. All right, how about this one, modern Homo sapiens? Betsy says that much. 160,000 years. That's even smaller. Compared to the age, it started 14 billion versus 4.5 billion for Earth, 160,000 for modern Homo sapiens, and there was some evidence of what you might call pre-Homo sapiens back to 300,000 years. So man's been around just, Betsy said, a little bit. All right, now our personal exploration from your perspective, plus or minus 100 years. You hadn't had much time to learn a bunch of stuff, but you have, and it's almost beyond comprehension to look back and try to put it all together and to look forward, which we really don't understand. Someplace in there is you, and in particular, someplace in there is your travel experiences, and that's what we're going to celebrate today. We're going to share our explorations, which is one of the main ways that we increase our knowledge and our enjoyment of this created world. Next slide. This thing, oh, here we go. Let me punch that. All right. Here we go. Besides eating, travel is one of the most common interests here at Brandon Oaks. Well, making tomorrow probably is the most common, but eating and travel is a big time. 52 out of 200 surveys responded to a point that we could put together some data. Teresa tells me from a statistical standpoint that that's pretty good return. And particularly from Brandon Oaks' previous surveys, that's an excellent return. Yeah. Look at the accumulation of data of countries visited. It's hard to read. There are over 100 countries listed on this map down at the bottom, all the way across. And up here is the number of respondents that had visited those countries. Well, it's pretty obvious that from 0 to 10 out here, we don't have a lot of ganging up in countries. From 10 up to 30, we get a lot of people who have visited the same countries. Difficult to read, but you'll see some of that in the next slide. And that is my favorite country. You could probably guess that Italy, France, Scotland, Norway, England, some of those in Western Europe would be the choice of tourists. And then it starts getting a little thinner. We get Ireland, Japan, England, Denmark, Netherlands, Switzerland. We're still kind of in that Western Europe, Northern Europe group. Now there's Cuba, New Zealand, Austria, Finland, Haiti, Russia, the Netherlands. On down there's Lebanon and Mongolia, which you'll hear about in a little bit. But what a spread for this congregation of people. Amazing. I've used just a couple of stick pins to kind of highlight a few places that are way out and beyond. We didn't deal in the survey with the United States because there are so many of you have visited so many states, it would be almost impossible to put a graphic together. It all just kind of blend. But that's why the big stick pin is up there. We've got a number of our folks that are going to share with us their travel experiences, either their favorite country and why, or maybe an anecdote of what might have happened in a travel experience for them. And that's going to help give you, I hope, some idea of the broad diversity and spectrum of the experience of the Brandon Oaks community. Now, Betsy Albert's going to lead off. She's top of the list in number of countries visited, but she's going to lead off with a very unusual look at a country that's her favorite.
reflections and memories are aptly made a good topic. Anyway, there are a number of you who visited one of my favorite countries, and I visited different than many of you, and that is Vietnam. Okay. Vietnam was a highlight for me, not only because I wanted to learn more about what we call the Vietnam War, which the Vietnamese call the American War. They do not call it the Vietnamese War. And I learned historically a lot about what went into the thinking on the Vietnamese people. For over a century, Vietnam had been occupied. It had never been its own country. It had been taken over by the Japanese, the Chinese, the Cambodians, the Laotians, the French, whom they do not like, and then they were told the Americans were coming to take their country. I think if somebody told us that a foreigner was coming to take our country, we'd all stand up and fight. So I had a great appreciation for that side of the story. My favorite area was Hanoi, North Vietnam. Number of reasons. One, I got to see Hanoi Hilton, where John McCain was imprisoned, and he became one of my icons. To see that he was chained to what would be a slate slab and allowed all of the other soldiers to leave before he would leave, I think was a man of courage. Hanoi is a very interesting city. The streets do not have traffic except foot traffic, except the main streets. And they're laid out, so if you want to go shopping for shoes, there is a section that deals with nothing but shoes. Store after store, nothing but shoes. There's a jewelry, which I loved, section. There's men's clothing, there's women's clothing, children. It's all systematically laid out, which was very interesting. The Vietnamese do not have a democratic society. It is a republic, a socialistic republic, in as such as the shopkeepers manage their own shops and they keep their own money, even though it has communistic, Leningrad, and a number of other inputs into the type of republic that they have. One of the most interesting things was to go through the tunnels in the jungle. When I thought of jungle, I thought of like Amazon, but it's not. It's like almost like magnolia type leaves. They never disintegrate. And the gentleman we had, the Vietnamese gentleman, who was probably about 4'7" and maybe weighed 100 pounds if he was wet, was the one who described the Vietnam tunnels. Looking at the tunnels, outside of them were what we call termite mounds, which were about 3 feet tall in the jungle. And they made replicas of those with holes where they could shoot out anybody coming by. Hence, I learned a great appreciation for the U.S. soldiers who never knew where the enemy was. You know, the Vietnamese man said, "Now, I want you to look over there." And we all looked over there, and we turned back, and he was gone. It was like he disappeared, and he popped up over here. So the tunnels were covered with leaves that didn't disappear, and they could go down one tunnel and pop up somewhere else. So fighting the enemy for the American soldier was terrible. It was almost impossible to find where these tunnels were because all the bombs that had been dropped, what the Vietnamese did was to shovel the dirt out and put it into the crater made by the bomb, so it didn't look like it had been, the earth had been disturbed. There were about 16 people in my group, and I was what who didn't take music. I was one of the limited number of people who could go through the tunnel because they are so small, because the Vietnamese people are very small. And it was very interesting to see how they had different sections, including war rooms, etc. So like I said, that was, to me, one of the most interesting countries educationally to learn about what is our recent history. Any questions? Yes?
Was the food any good?
Food any good? Yes, it was excellent. I love Vietnamese food. Like I say, North Vietnam is one of the few countries, since I rarely go back to the same country, but it's one country I would like to go back to see the Hanoi Bay, or the bay that's out there. So, thank you.
Thank you. Well done. And now that we're on the other side of the world, we're going to go to the bottom of the world, and Fred is going to share some travel journeys that he and Iris have enjoyed. Hope this works. If not, tell me and I'll push the button. Yeah.
Maybe we should go to the next slide.
I tell you what, to advance a slide,
Yeah.
push that button right
Okay.
there.
All right. Okay. Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Fred Duran, and Iris is sitting right over there. We've traveled to a lot of countries. Probably our favorite ones that Buster asked us about was where to go to South Africa and Italy. South Africa for its tour of the animals and all that you see on the various safaris you see there. And Italy, we never got a bad meal in Italy. It was just a wonderful place to visit, the historical aspect of it, and also visiting Pompeii and the ruins there were fantastic. But I will talk a little bit about our latest trip, which was last January, middle of January actually, which is summertime in Antarctica. And as you can see on the map, right there is the tip of Antarctica, which is a continent that goes all around the South Pole, and it has a peninsula that sticks up. Closest part to South America was right there is Chile. And that's, I'll get on to my next slide here. That's the ship we traveled on. It's the Viking Polaris. The ship is a special expedition ship that only holds 378 guests, 256 crew. It's 665 feet long and was built in 2022. And it's an expedition ship, and primarily it does scientific work in Antarctica, so a lot of the people on board were scientists, and they gave some very interesting presentations. Let me try another slide here. This trip started out of Ushuaia. Ushuaia is the southernmost city in South America, in Chile, and that's where we met the ship. And that's pretty much a quick look at the passage. We went out the Beaver Channel across the Drake Passage, let me back up here. That one through the Drake Passage, which can be very rough at times, although this ship is very comfortable, and we enjoyed being on it, and we had no problems. But we went down and visited several places on the peninsula. Am I doing this right? Well, whatever. I'll go to the next one. That's typical of the land that you see when you get across the Drake Passage, and you see the mountains and the snow covered. And this is the middle of the summer now, so there are icebergs in the water, and the glaciers are calving, and it makes for some very interesting looking scenery. Interestingly, one day we actually saw a sailboat, must have been not more than 30 feet long, sailing out there in that thing. I took a picture of it, but I didn't include it in these slides. I don't know what he was doing out there. Let me go to the next one here. This is the gear that they give you. Well, they don't give it to you. It costs a bunch. But anyway, Iris and I are decked out in our Arctic clothing, Antarctic clothing. Underneath the outer garments are a layer of thermal underwear and thermal other devices. You get to the land, this is actually on the peninsula itself, and you get there by boarding a rubberized raft called a, Zodiac, that's the word I'm groping for. And you have to be kind of agile to do this. You kind of roll onto it on your stomach and then roll around onto your back and sit on the side of the Zodiac and hang on to a rope while it ferries you across the water from, that's our ship right there, to that peninsula. And you get on board, and then you can, once you're there, you can see some of the sights. And most of us wanted to see the penguins. These are Gen 2 penguins, and they like to be on the rocks. And some are waiting for their parents to come back from foraging so that they can be fed, and some are just hanging out there. That's a little different view of them. This was a guy that really thought he was pretty handsome. And there's some more of the penguins. But I'm getting into Rita Watkins' talk, and Brent, you wanted me to end here, don't you? Yeah. Okay. I'll turn it over to Bester.
Thank you, Rick. Right now, for a little more civilized background, Rita's very favorite country is England. She's going to share a bit of those feelings.
Right. Well, I have been pretty much all over the world, but my favorite place in the world is England. Anything English. English literature, English food, English history, English literature. I love it. I could probably tell you all the kings and queens, but I'll not try it today. When we were there, what I noticed the very first time I was in England, which was probably 1979, they seemed to be about 50 years behind us. They had cell phones, which we didn't really have that much, because I could see people standing on the corner, and I thought, what is he doing? You know? But then their refrigerators were about 2 by 2, and their stoves had about 3 burners, and it just was strange to me. But we loved driving. We'd stay in London for a little while, but after that, we left. We didn't even go into the city. We would just get a car and drive out into the country. Oh, look, there's some chimneys over there. Let's go see what we can see. And we'd go, and it would be some big manor house. And, of course, with all the death duties that the English royalty or higher, the high-class people have to pay, lots of them have turned their big piles, as they call them, over to the National Trust because they can't afford to maintain them anymore. Now, I like London, but I like the Midlands, up where the Cotswolds are, and those beautiful stone cottages and thatched roofs, and you learn some history. If you see a thatched roof house that does not have a thatched bird on the top, the people still owe for that roof. Because if it's paid for, they put a little thatched bird up on top, which I thought was pretty interesting. We were in Salisbury one time, and once we were in the city, we really didn't like to drive because, of course, they drive on the opposite side of the road, and that's a little scary, especially in a lot of traffic. So we would take the bus. We were standing in the queue, as they say, waiting for the bus to go back out into the suburbs for our B&B. And Ed and I were talking together. And this little girl that was about 13 years old, she said, oh, are you from the States? And I said, yes. And she goes, oh, do you know Michael Jackson? I said, well, honey, I know of him, but I don't know him personally. But, you know, they just thought everybody who was from the United States would know personally all those celebrities. And we had once or twice, I had a couple of our kids with us, and one of my daughters says, Mom, why are all English people's shoes ugly? I said, what do you mean ugly? She said, look at that woman. She has on the ugliest shoes I ever saw in my life. Well, they were, oh shoot, what did you call those things? I can't, they were like a brogand. Doc Martens, right, thank you. I couldn't remember what it was called. So about 5 years later, we were going back. She goes, Mom, please get me a pair of Doc Martens. So my favorite part, let's see, where's this little clicker? This part right in here is one of my favorite parts. Now, London is down here. Oh, sorry. London is down here. And when you get down in here at Dorset and Devon, it's mostly grass and farms and cows and sheep and stuff. But when you go up in here, that's where you see all the little quaint little villages. I don't know if any of you have ever watched on television Midsummer Murders. Well, that's in here, in that area. There is no such place as Midsummer, but there's a lot of little villages right in there that could be Midsummer. It's my goal, one of these days, to go from Land's End, which is way down here, all the way up here by train to John O'Groats. One of these days. Do you have any questions? Thank you.
Let's go from civilization to wilderness in South Africa.
On my bucket list.
Huh?
It's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, there you are. Here I am. Janet and Jim, we had the good fortune of traveling a lot in regard to higher education. And so at one point in our lives, it was towards the, after the turn of the century, we were with a United Methodist affiliated school, Shenandoah University it was. And we had the opportunity to go to Africa because the international Methodists were forming the Africa University in Mutare, Zimbabwe. So here we were. Zimbabwe is up here above. This is northeast South Africa, and then Mozambique's over here. So we were living and traveling in Zimbabwe first. And then later, in that same visit, I believe it was, Jim, was it, or a second trip? I can't remember. Anyway, we had an opportunity to go with one of our Board of Trustees members who was very interested in ecotourism in Africa and also in saving the elephants because there was so much warring going on in various countries that the elephants were being slaughtered. And there were so many in one place that they would cull them. And so she was interested, instead of culling them, flying them by plane from one area to another country. So we got to go and visit Africa with her. And so we were in the Sabi Sabi Game Reserve, and it was right across from the Kruger National Park in this area, across the river. And Sabi Sabi was one of, I guess you would call it an elite preserve. we were able to stay in that spot in a round, very nice round apartment, thatched roof. But we were within the walls of the preserve because, of course, the animals are all out there. So we would go into our apartment at night, and we're told we could not leave the apartment until somebody came for us in the morning because it wasn't safe to roam around because the animals were out there. So at any rate, they would come for us at 5 in the morning, and we'd go out on safari. And you know the safari vehicles with the raised bench seats and whatever, and you go out in the morning at 5 because that's when the animals are moving around. So you stayed in the safari vehicle, of course. But then one afternoon they said, oh, we're going to go for a walk. Oh, that's lovely. We thought we were going to walk on the compound. Well, they took us out in the safari vehicle, and out we go down the dirt road for miles and miles. We stop. And the ranger, who had one gun, and the driver said, okay, this is where we get out of the vehicle and we go for a walk. So we were out in the bush, literally out in the bush in the afternoon. So you go from being the top of the food chain to the bottom of the food chain because you're out walking in the bush in your camouflage outfits and whatever else. So there's some very interesting stories about that. Quickly, the night before we left the preserve, they said we're going to go to a buffet, a banquet. So in the vehicles we go again, and they carry the food out into the bush where they have a clearing, and they have all the food prepared in these big, huge urns and whatever, and they have tables with silverware and linen tablecloths, and you're sitting out in the bush having the most delicious dinner you can imagine, and you're hearing the elephants over here behind the trees. And you have a pit fire, and they said, oh, they won't come in when there's fire. You know? Yeah, right. So anyhow, that was very exciting. And the one last thing the point I wanted to make, the diversity that was in South Africa. We had to go back to South Africa to Johannesburg to fly home, and we had some extra hours, and so we went from the airport back into the town of Johannesburg, went to one of the finest, most beautiful shopping areas downtown that you can imagine, but in doing so, going from the airport back to town to the shopping area, we passed by the areas such as Soweto, seeing people living in huts with tin roofs that they've just gathered. And here you are going by, and you can see this big city in there. And you get in there and you see all the haute couture and all the fancy stuff. And it was just a startling thing to see those people. And many of them who work in the shopping area in the towns live in the shanties, hand to mouth. So anyway, Africa's a fabulous, wonderful place to be, to see the animals. And for a little girl that didn't have a lot of opportunity to travel when I was little, and we've had, I don't know how many countries gone to, 50, 60, I don't know, all over the place. And it was just a fantastic journey. Oh, yeah, we saw the elephants while we were in the bush. Oh, yeah, we saw the lions, we saw, the great big buffalo, and we were glad we didn't see the black mamba snakes while we were out in the bush walking.
Thank you, Jared. All right, we're going to go from way down South Africa to way up north and someplace that I had to really look hard to even find on the map, but it's a huge area, and this is Mongolia. And Bob Miller has been to Mongolia. I know he's kind of weird, but this is really something. You want this?
I will take that. Where's the little clicker? this on? Yeah. I must be the most naive person in the world, and probably the only person here that talks slower than I do is Buster. But he told me I had 2 minutes and 2 slides for my presentation. So I did go to Mongolia. Capital, which I told Buster yesterday, is Ulaanbaatar. It's about in this area. Our tour started there, of course. We flew down the southern part, close in here is the Gobi Desert. Then we came back up north, which is kind of still deserty, but more flat. And here we got the ethnic Buddhist tour of all of their old buildings. And then went up in this area close to the Russian border to a lake that was up there. This is as clear as this Lake Baikal, which is the largest something or the other, and came back to Ulaanbaatar. But the area that fascinated me the most is this area right here in this Gobi Desert area. It's a vast area. Oh, Sherry didn't go on this trip because the tour book said that we were going to be sleeping in these yurts. Actually, in Mongolia, they're called gers. And they were... The tourist ones were set up on concrete bases and had cots in them, and down south they had vents in the top. And this was the rainy season, by the way. You can see there's scant grass in there, but we did sleep in that. The drawback was that you had community toilets, so you had to go in there and shower with anybody that was in there, and all the other stuff. And but while we were out traveling vast distances in these cars, we'd stop for rest breaks. The men would go on this side of the cars, the women would go on that side. And Sherry was talking about reason she didn't want to go because she didn't want to go pee behind a tree, and I told her there were no trees. So I'm glad she wasn't with me because she'd still be griping about it. I did take my grandson with me, and he had a great trip. But the spaces were just vast and open, and I imagined that I could see the old Mongolian hordes going through here. You'd be driving down the road, and here would be a herd of camels, and over here a herd of horses, and maybe goats, and cattle were seen more up in the northern part of the country. But we stopped at several of these homes that were just out there, and the families were all very nice, and this is pretty much typical dress you saw, and it mixed Western and Mongolian. An interesting thing is every one of these, when we stopped at the camel herder's place, we drank fermented camel's milk and camel milk cheese, and when we stopped at the horse place, we drank fermented mare's milk and horse cheese, and when we got to the cattle place, we drank fermented cattle milk and ate cattle cheese. The only bad part of that was the camel cheese is not very good at all, folks. But anyhow, it was a great trip. I like to go places that not crowded with tourists, and certainly Mongolia was not crowded with tourists. I remember the name of one other town and it's Ugly. It's spelled ugly, but they pronounce it Ugly. So I've got 500 more pictures. If you want to see them sometime, just come by the house.
Thanks, Bob. All right, let's go back to south of the border and Caribbean area, and Sharon and Mike Sexton have had an adventure they want to share down there. Yeah. Okay.
So much for Michael and Sharon sharing. Anyhow, in about 2006, Michael's spring break and my spring break happened to coincide. Very rare event, and we decided we wanted to take a trip and go someplace that was a bucket list and meaningful to us. And we chose Panama. Going to Panama, we arranged every engineering tour there could possibly be about the canal. But we also accidentally found out that on one Saturday a month, there's a small tourist boat that goes through the canal. And we made arrangements to be part of that one Saturday's tour. Well, I'm calling it a boat. It's really a ship, but it's very tiny. I had about 165 guests on it, and we had to wait our turn to get into the lock because we had to go in behind some other freighter that wasn't too big, and there was room for us. So we kind of piggybacked our way through the canal. Canal is lovely, jungles, took us all day. We were very tired. And about the fifth lock, we were rather bored. You know, there's just not a whole lot of going up and going down and going up and going down. So we get to the other side where we went from Panama City over to the eastern part of the country and took a train back. The reason it was a bucket list, it is a very engineering marvel, but it was meaningful, and the reason we chose meaningful is because both of our fathers had gone through the canal to fight in the Pacific Theater in World War II.
Thanks, Sharon. Back to Western Europe now, to a little more civilization. Barbara Hale's favorite is Belgium. She's going to tell us a bit about her travel experience.
Goeiedag, dames en heren. As usual, I come to you with an entirely different story because I'm no tourist. I live there. My husband started international work in about 1960-something, 65. And by 1975, they said, how would you like to go and live in Belgium? So, do you have my map? Yes, you do. The area there by the North Sea was where we lived when we first went there. And we lived in a beautiful architect's home about 3 blocks maybe from the North Sea. And we did all of our language experience at that time in the Flemish language, which is very much like what they speak in Holland, which is Netherlands. And were there about 2 years. And then we went to Brussels for the remainder of the time that we were there, and we were in the French language. And if you look again to the right there on the eastern side of Belgium, that's the German language. So I have very strong feelings about how important it is to be able to communicate with other people. And I've done English as second language because you have to know how to speak with your associates. And so, whoops, what did I do? I disconnected everything. I was so comfortable. Anyway, because of the area of the map there, I worked in the treasure trove this morning for 4 hours, and I had picked this up in the treasure trove. This is Belgian lace, which is one of the tourist items. But also, I noticed on your blue map that Belgium was under clouds because it rains every day in Belgium. But to go back to the language, when our older children were college bound, and so they went to an international school in Brussels, but they had to learn the local language. So the first thing they were taught in the local language was when people were cursing at you, so that you would know you were being insulted and you knew you could better walk away and get away from that. But I want to tell you when we went there, I'm coming back to the beginning, and the language. We were there on the coast, and I had unpacked all these packing boxes because they took our furniture over in a container, and it was delivered after about 6 weeks. And we were expecting company. And I'd been working so hard getting things ready. We had 4 bedrooms and a library with a sleep sofa, and our first guests were a family of 7. Anyway, we were working in Flemish. No, wait, I sort of lost my train of thought there. And I know the second word. I only have 2 minutes, so I've got to think real fast. Oh, well, I'll go to the second word. No, I was weary, that's it, and had the backache from all those boxes. So my friend came, and she said, well, you need a heating pad. So I said, well, we'll run down to Bruges, and we'll go to a store and see if we can find it. Well, naturally, we had the language problem, so we did all this gesticulating and tried other languages and so on to try to make them understand we wanted a heating pad. And finally, the light went on in the salesman's head, and he said, you want a verwarmen kussen. And what that was a warming cushion. And we finally figured that one out. And the other thing was going to a nature park. The fence came out partially across the sidewalk and made a very narrow entrance. And there was a sign there, a circular sign with a slash across it. Well, a circular sign in Europe with a slash across it means don't even think about it. So what word was on this sign was, if I can do it, the Dutch sometimes roll their R's. So is Joanna here today? Okay, I can get by with it. It was Brumfietser. Do you know what a Brumfietser is? Don't do it. Don't even think about it. Don't bring your motorcycle. That's my 2 minutes.
Thank you. Tom and Peggy Strong are going to share experiences in one of the most beautiful cities in the world.
I'll start off by saying that Buster's one of the few people that talks slowly enough that I can understand. What? All right. Did anybody hear what I said? All right. I said, Buster's the only person here that speaks slowly enough that I can understand. And I feel that the way we've been treated so kindly and graciously anywhere in our travels is when they hear my Delta drawl, they figure I'm so stupid that they need to give me all the help I need. Now, I found out there are 3 phrases you need to learn in any foreign travel. Please, thank you, and where's the bathroom? Now, we ended up in Prague after a tour of Eastern Europe, and it is truly a fairyland. It's like walking into a Grimm's fairy tale. The people were very gracious to us. The St. Charles Bridge was like going to a carnival. There were mimes, clowns, people playing the hurdy-gurdy, people selling souvenirs out there. The St. George's Cathedral was a magical place. But unfortunately, they wouldn't let you sit down in the church. You could wander around it and look at all the ornaments, but you couldn't stay there and absorb it. Our hotel was on Winchester Square, and there was this bizarre, huge brass casting hanging from a crane of an armored knight astride the belly of a dead mule that was upside down. Most grotesque thing I've ever seen. And I've talked to people later, and apparently the thing is still there. And Peggy loved to shop there. You come up and talk. You don't want? You want to say it? Oh, all right.
I'll have to say we were traveling before.
Wait, let me get it.
All right.
Get this.
We'll fall on our face if we travel down. All right. I thought Prague had this magic feel to it. We were with a tour group with the Eastern Orthopedic, I think, where we got to go some very interesting places. But one of the things that fascinated me is the mining of garnets, the jewel garnets. We got, and I don't have it with me right now, a beautiful necklace that had the gold with the little garnets around it. But the only thing that I think I can add was this feeling that we were almost in a fairy tale in that land. I would recommend it highly. Thank you.
Let me add one thing. Going to the Jewish section was a very sobering event to see what they did during the Holocaust.
Okay, guys, that's all our scheduled speakers. We're about out of time. It worked beautifully, and thank everybody for sharing their stories. And I hope that it will prompt you to think about what's your international story. And we've got a lot of meals ahead of us and time to share some of that around the dinner table. One last thing, and that is, I mentioned the United States, and all of you have traveled, some extensively, some have hit all 70 states, and U.S. protectorates. So just look at the map and just take a minute to kind of reflect on your United States travels and where you have been. I had thought, have you got your, just take a minute, but as a reminder, we're going to do another travel song. What have you got? Okay. Yeah, before folks leave, I'd like to recognize Nicole Bruce, who's back at the back today, and she's leaving Brandon Oaks and headed to different pastures. Nicole, thank you for your service, gal. Okay, go find your rainbow.